Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Moran. I'm president and CEO of the Palace Theater here in Stamford, Connecticut. I want to thank Steve Love and Ben for inviting me to host this episode of Artists on Lockdown. Before we get started, I just want to share that, my heart goes out to so many people today who have been impacted by the COVID virus, the wildfires, the hurricanes, the social unrest. I know that we can come together and get through this. My heart, my prayers are with you guys. So today we are going to be joined by legendary David Victor, formerly of Boston. David, how are you today?
Well, I feel excessively legendary today, Mike. Thank you for having me here on Artists on Lockdown. I told my wife today, I'm locked down, honey. I can't get out.
Well, the venues can't wait until you're not on lockdown, David.
Well, we would love to be in those venues. It's been a very strange year being not inside hotel rooms and flying in Southwest flights and transferring in Midway, Chicago, and, all the stuff we got used to doing.
So, David, we know about your stint with Boston, 2012 to 2014. But let's roll it back. How did you get started in this business?
Well, great question, Mike. I actually started when my sister's boyfriend was sitting on our front lawn in Walnut Creek, California, playing a few strains of More Than a Feeling. And I asked him, how long have you been playing? And he said, 2 weeks. And I said, that's the art for me. That's the career path I need to become legendary. So I started playing guitar and did like original bands, cover bands for a number of years. Actually I've wrote and produced 5 albums now of original music. And fast forwarding all that, I moved to LA in well past my due date in 1999. And when I got down there was this phenomenon of, cover bands that would only play the music of one artist. And they were known as tribute bands. So I joined a Boston tribute band, figuring, well, that sounds like fun. Always loved the music and got my start that way. And actually, that band has also featured the guitarist that's current last 10 or 13 years been touring with Dennis DeYoung. So we had a really good Boston tribute band. And kind of dovetailed into my opportunity with the actual band.
So other influences, were you listening to jazz growing up, or was it all hard rock, a little country?
Yeah. So when I first sort of came online, listening to AM radio in the 70s, I loved R&B. I loved the Spinners and Al Green and all this old, kind of blue-eyed soul poppy stuff. And that's really where I just loved, developed the love of music. And then I remember I had a job as a gardener, and I listened to this station all the time, and they would play like these underground tracks. And one of the artists was UFO. One of the artists was Van Halen. And so that's when I really was like, oh, I got, really got into playing and learning how to solo and all that stuff. And I just wanted to be a guitar player, man. I didn't want to sing. That's for sissies. So I was just, the guitar guy, and then kind of realized, hey, nobody can sing. And oftentimes people like it when people sing. So I kind of just took it upon myself to see if I could do that. And
you're a West Coast guy.
Yes.
And you end up playing with a band out of Boston.
Yeah. No, I mean, people forget, I think, how titanic Boston was in terms of that, that 70s epic Coliseum rock, triumvirate. If you were putting together a huge, like you're in Texas and you want to put together the biggest rock show that anybody's ever seen, you'd be like, okay, we get Boston. Now who else? I mean, really, they were like right in that top 3 of like major rock bands with, Led Zeppelin and, Queen and, all these huge, like you say, legendary names. And how I became, got on their radar was really the most democratic way possible, which was YouTube. They obviously, when their original singer, Brad Delp, who's to me one of the least mentioned and best rock vocalists of all time. When you say, oh, who's a rock vocalist? Oh, Robert Plant. And let me keep thinking. But I mean, Brad Delp was just an amazing, amazing voice and just a super nice individual. Unfortunately, I never got a chance to meet him, but I did go see him live, and just an incredible voice and incredibly nice guy. And just the rock world is, worse off for having lost him. But when I was playing in this Boston tribute band when I heard he had passed away, and I just remember we were actually in a Bed Bath & Beyond, and I heard this news, and I was just like, kind of like a lightning bolt went through my soul, like, oh, something huge has happened. And it was a couple years, I guess 3 years after that I got the call that, they were looking for somebody to also sing. And so I didn't know at that point what was going on, because I knew they had hired a singer, Tommy DiCarlo, who's a fantastic vocalist and does a killer Brad Delp. He just has that sound, that kind of round Brad Delp soulful sound. And
the band, isn't he?
I'm sorry?
He's still with the band, isn't he?
Oh yeah. Tommy's still with the band, and just a phenomenal vocalist. So I didn't know if I was supposed to replace him or what my role was, but as it turned out, I came in as the sort of utility infielder, guitar guy, and vocalist. And I figured, well, I'll be getting the other songs, and that'll be cool. But as it turned out, I got to sing, my favorite Boston songs of all time. I got to sing "Peace of Mind," which is my favorite Boston song of all time. "Amanda," which was, their huge #1 hit from '86, and I got to sing the chorus of "More Than a Feeling." So, those are the, the crown jewels of the,
Yeah. So you talked about a little bit about prior to Boston. Tell me about Velocity. What was Velocity?
Yeah. So working backwards, interesting little story there. So in the 90s, I kind of was able to, produce my first albums. One came out in 91, and then this one, Velocity, this album called Impact in 96, 97. I can't even remember exactly when it came out, because we started to get airplay through this thing called Album Network. So people would get these CDs distributed with these different tracks on them, and these program directors, which they used to have back in the day, and they would actually decide what would I like to program. And one of those things was we had a single called "You Don't Amaze Me Anymore" on this Album Network sampler, and this station out in Salt Lake City, of all places, started playing it, and it went to #1 on their playlist. And they started playing, we obviously sent them copies of our album. They started playing other songs from the album. And so we had 3 songs that actually went to #1 on this kind of upstart station, but in a mid-major market, Salt Lake City. And we ended up selling over 12,000 copies of our album, and over 5,000 in Salt Lake City alone. And at that time, it was outselling Metallica, their album that had just come out. So, and we started getting airplay on a few other stations, including one, I think, in Connecticut, if memory serves. And then it was like Clear Channel came in and went, no, this cannot be. We have a spreadsheet that tells us that if you play Back in Black 106 times instead of 105 times, you will get 0.0003% more listeners which means we can charge our advertisers more, and there you go. So no original music.
Big Brother was watching. Did you guys tour Velocity?
Well, we kept going to Utah, right? Because that's where we kept getting played. And we were, like people say they're big in Japan. We were big in Utah for a while there. We actually did did some kind of a Spinal Tap idea, go out and do a in-store signing and then, cross your fingers. And we showed up to this one strip mall in Sandy, Utah, and we saw these people outside and we're like, oh, there must be something going on here. And it turned out they were there to see us. So the cool thing was it was kind of happening in this very organic way. Like a radio station was playing it. People were voting with their feet and their dollars, and they would go see us. And we were playing increasingly large venues out there. And so it just felt very much like, oh, this is really how it works, when you have good music and people respond to it. And we had a huge cross-section of fans, like, farmers and people with, pins through their cheeks and cheerleaders and all this stuff, It was just this weird, like, oh, this is a real thing that could happen. And then when the airplay stopped, it was like, that was it. I mean, there was just no more, organic reach. And we played a few shows in LA, and 4 people showed up, and it was like, okay, that's it.
So you had some pretty incredible band members in Velocity, didn't you? What there's some
incredible. Well,
profile names.
I thought okay. So on the recording, I had Pat Torpey, who was an incredible session drummer. He played with Robert Plant, and obviously his own band, Mr. Big, which was one of my favorite bands. Paul Gilbert and Eric Martin on vocals, and just some incredible musicians. And so I was, honored to get the chance to have him play on my album. So he played on that album. And, but then when we toured, it was, my own local buddies that I put together. And it was actually ended up being a good band. We toured, like I say, constantly. And actually ended up buying an RV so we could go back and forth to Utah. But it was really a Utah area phenomena. Okay. And just as the recording, I mean, obviously I couldn't hire Pat Torpey to play, to go tour with us. So
that was pre-Boston Tribute Band, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So I was still in Northern California when I did those albums. And then I moved to LA in '99. And then that's when I ended up in the band was called Smokin'. And that was in like 2004, 2005, 2006, right in that era, and played with them for a couple years, and then started putting together my own things, and the call from Boston. So I was actually joined Boston in 2010, but they weren't doing anything. So Boston would take 2, 3, 4, 5 years between tours at that point. And so I was in the band, but I couldn't tell anybody I was in the band. And so that was a real tough time. Finally got my brass ring, and I couldn't say anything.
So now they're a Boston-based band, right?
Yeah.
What, the MIT or something, right? And so
yeah, I keep forgetting. I'm pretty sure it was MIT. Yeah, and I think everybody thinks he had an electronics degree because he made the Rockman, but I think he had a degree in aeronautics.
Okay.
Yeah, and he flies. He's a private pilot and flies, and I got to fly in it. And he flew me to where did we play? We played in oh darn, these names are escaping me. But we had to land in Maryland, so out there somewhere, and go through all the because you can't just land. You have to go through all these little tunnels that because they don't want you crashing your plane into the White House or whatever. So they send you through all these little air tunnels that make it known that you're a friend and not a foe. So that was fun. That was fun to fly with Tom piloting the plane.
So did this band predominantly reside in Boston when they were getting ready to gear up for a tour?
Yeah. So Tommy lives in somewhere in the Carolinas. I forget if it was South or North Carolina. And the rest of them live in Massachusetts. various areas in Massachusetts. So actually, when I got a chance to audition to sing on the album, that was my audition, the album that came out in 2014. And it was, come out to Massachusetts. And actually, just sheer coincidence, we already had a vacation plan to go to Martha's Vineyard. So we were coming out there anyway. And I said, actually, I'm coming out there in 2 weeks. So it was like, great, save me a plane ticket. So flew out there and drove to the studio, the secret hideaway, and recorded. And just kind of got in that sort of recording door. I guess if you can't record, they figure you can't. And there was plenty of video of me on YouTube performing, so I guess they figured I could play. So.
And so you did a concert in Boston shortly after the unfortunate tragedy around the marathon, correct?
Yes. So Boston Strong, that was really the most amazing thing. I guess Boston hadn't played in Boston for many years. And of course, when that tragedy happened, they were putting together a charity, concert. And so a really impactful, musical and just a day of coming together. And, when I see what's going on in society now, I think back to that day of like just pure unity and music and just the good feeling and just such an intense, feeling to connect that horrible event with something so, like I say, impactful and musical, and just you really saw the power of how music would, bring people together. And of course, I have a funny, kind of a funny story about that day, which was, my own personal musical watermark, which I think there might be a picture of. We did our show. We opened the show, and they actually had some survivors come out and speak beforehand. And we all got up and everybody stood up and put their hand on their heart. And it was just a really beautiful moment. And Boston opened the show. And so we did, I think, 4 songs. And so the nice thing is, you're scared to death. The place is, 20,000 people all there for this, just so impactful, important event. You just think about music as such a entertainment and a nice to have kind of thing. But at those moments where people are really, I don't know, they need healing, music can be such an incredible force for healing. And, that's why I think it's been such a tragedy in this COVID thing and all this societal unrest that we haven't been able to have that kind of unifying musical feeling that we all look for. So Boston Strong, which was the name of the show, was that event. And when we got a chance to get out and do our songs, and we hadn't practiced, I think we practiced once or twice, and we changed the arrangement on one song. And so it was a little bit of a high wire act, but we got out there and pretty much did it. And so after that, the pressure was off. And it was great because I got a chance, my wife and I, to hang out backstage and meet all these Boston area luminaries, the James Taylor and Carole King, and of course, Aerosmith and Jay Giles Band and Extreme and, all these, there we go. So, so the story with that picture was they had already done a run through of their finale, and they were going to come together for the finale. And so we watched them in the audience do the run through during the rehearsal. And I was like, oh, cool, Aerosmith and everything. This will be fun. So we're backstage and we'd had a few blasts, right? Just getting to meet everybody. We met Doug Flutie and, just all these people just having a good time, completely relaxed because we did our set, right? So we're done. So we said, oh, we should go out and watch Aerosmith. So we were like sitting out there in the audience watching Aerosmith and just having a good time. And then they start to play the song. And my wife goes, you should be up there. And I'm like, oh, no. They already did the run through. They don't need the legendary David Fair on that stage. She's like, you should be up there. And I'm like, I should be up there. So I just had enough liquid courage to get me out of my seat. And I walk up there, and the legendary moment was not actually being up there on stage. The legendary moment was 30 giant men in yellow windbreakers parting the Red Sea and allowing me to get up on stage to have that moment, because you see a giant guy in a yellow windbreaker, you're not going anywhere. And I got 30 of them to just part like the Red Sea. So beautiful, legendary rock and roll moment for a young, impressionable David Victor in 2013.
So you speak of the great Boston bands, Jay Giles, Aerosmith, and on it goes. EMAC and Bolios mean anything to you?
Uh-oh.
You know, Boston apparently had a reputation as being one of those sleepy towns at one point in time, that by 11 o'clock, things were quiet in Boston.
Right.
And my understanding that some attorney who was a rock concert just nut opened a brownstone, and bands could go to this brownstone after their shows at the old Boston Garden, and they would make ice cream. Became the EMAC and Bolios chain. And so there are certain flavors of EMAC and Bolio ice cream that were actually made at this brownstone, which are featured at, they have one at the Hard Rock in Orlando.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Maybe you would have an EMAC and Bolio story.
I don't have an EMAC and Bolio story. You know, my actual time on target, my actual time in Boston and where we rehearsed, which is a little north of Boston, was so like a camera flash, you know, and I would have loved, I actually, like I said, my vacation that we took out to, you know, the Dennisport, Hyannisport, you know, Martha's Vineyard, that whole Cape Cod. We got a chance to go up to Boston. I did the Freedom Trail and the stuff you're supposed to do, and I loved it. I just loved how the city was laid out and the history. And I mean, you know, grow up in the West Coast, my only exposure to history from, you know, the old world was Disneyland. And we walk on that Freedom Trail and you actually see, oh, this is really a real graveyard with this crazy lettering and stuff. And it's like, my only exposure again was like Walt Disney. So I'm just like, wow, this is the real actual thing. And I just fell in love with the city. So I always wanted and relished the time that we would go back there, because I would take, you know, if we had a day off from rehearsal, I'd go out and go to Lexington or whatever. I mean, just all the places in the area to see and feel all this history. And it was so great. I just love being out there. That light ice cream, which I love ice cream, but I missed the boat on that one. I don't know how.
When I dreamed up that question, I wasn't sure where it would go, but I know it's just one of those spots, and I believe Aerosmith would spend time there, and a lot of other bands.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, it was beyond that. I think that, you know, the era that I was in the band, it was, you know, everybody retires to their homesteads, and the guys who are traveling are in the hotel, and that's, you know, you're sort of confined to quarters in some sense.
Writing or performing, which do you prefer?
Performing. Yeah. So when I did the, you know, Velocity albums, I mean, I literally was locked myself in my house for a decade to produce 2 albums. And I'm like, that sucked. I mean, I was in my 30s, prime time, you know, for performing. And the opportunities that we had to perform, like I said, were a few pretty nice shows that we did in like Salt Lake City and surrounding areas, but really nothing in terms of, you know, performance opportunities. And when you don't perform, you don't have those reps that you need. And by the time I got to do Boston Strong, I was so used to doing it, you know, from being in Boston, that it was, you know, it was still, you know, one of those high moments. But I mean, you get up there and you have the confidence that you're like, hey, you know, this is just like rehearsal. We're just doing what we're, you know, trained to do. And if you haven't done it that much, you get out there and you get the yips. And even if you have had a few good rehearsals, you know, your adrenaline just spikes and things happen that have never happened before. So
today it's David Victor and the Hits of Boston and Styx.
yeah.
How many shows a year pre-COVID were you doing?
COVID, yeah. So about anywhere between 30 and 40 shows. There's a couple other Miracle of Miracles Boston tribute bands that still play. And so we fit in somewhere in between there because I was in the actual band. And I have an incredible band of guys. I just love this band. Like everyone in this band is better at what they do than I am at what I do, which is exactly how I like it. Really great players and great human beings. And I love being on the road with them. We really look forward to those opportunities. And yeah, there's the guys now. And we had 2 shows this year. So we had a pre-COVID January show in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we have one more show this year in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, that is happening not this Friday, but next Friday, September 25th, outdoor show. Bring your mask and your flask and whatever you want to do, and come on out to beautiful Lawrenceburg, Indiana. It's outdoors, and I think it's going to be a good time, and the guys are itching to play. I know that, and everybody in the band sings. We got 5-part harmonies, and it's just really an incredible bunch of guys. Yeah.
And we are this is artist on Rock Band. We have the legendary David Victor with us today. I tend to be a bit of a country music fan right now. I don't know. I told you that my first Boston show was in October, and you guessed the year, 1976, when they opened for Blue Oyster Cult. But some of the artists that I've seen come over and do a little work in the country genre right now are kind of fascinating. I mean, Darius Rucker has kind of fully moved over, and Steven Tyler has done some things, and Aaron Lewis, who you'd never expect, has done some things. Is there any, do you have any affinity for country music?
Like I said, I started with pop, so I love poppy country. So I love like Keith Urban. Yep. He's a brilliant artist, a brilliant player, brilliant singer. The talent level of those guys is just off the charts. When you pull a country group together of, seasoned guys, it locks so quickly. And so I'm fascinated by them musically. I can't imagine, the talent. We visited Nashville a few years ago, and just the talent, just walking down the main drag there. I can't remember the name, but by the Rhine.
Lower Broadway.
Okay, there you go. And just, people there with their tip jars, and they're just off the charts talented, and you're just like, oh my God, it's just incredible. So I truly appreciate the musicianship. I tend to like the poppier stuff more than the sort of true country stuff. But I think that's most of country now, right?
I agree. Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, great artists and great lyricists too. Like the craftsmanship with the lyrics, I really admire them putting all that together. It's a great. I would have loved to have lived in Nashville after I experienced the nightlife and food and everything. I just thought, yeah, I could do this. It was cool.
So, as far as your diversity, don't you also have a Beatles project?
I do, yeah. So as part of my kind of restructuring, which I did, so I have a booking agency too. So I book my own bands as well as other bands. And I also do digital marketing as my day job. So I kind of took my digital marketing hat, put it on, and applied it to bands, and just see, well, what are the bands that people like? And Mike, you know better than anybody, the requests you get from your audience and what the shows are that sell. You get your Beatles show, you get your Queen show, maybe a Zeppelin show. Those are the big 3. So I actually put together a Beatles band this year that's all acoustic, and it's called Let It Be Acoustic. And so that we were just right when COVID hit, we were about to film our promo, but I got 3 brilliant players and me tagging along, and just vocals, stand-up bass, and no percussion, just keys and acoustic guitars, and just so you can really catch the vocal harmonies and everything. So it's kind of quasi a cappella Beatles harmonies and all the hits. And then I have a Zeppelin band that I'm not in. That's the same kind of thing, although they do have percussion, and that's called Acoustic Graffiti. And then I have a new Queen show that is called Bohemian Queen, and I'm not in that one either. I've got a brilliant lead vocalist in that one, and two of the guys from my Boston Styx band in that, and just brilliant players all around. So excited about the future. Was excited about 2020 until it all went to
Yeah. Harmony and Healing. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so that was a charity that I started. So when I was in Boston, I got a chance to do some nice visits to some children's hospitals and play music. That was the charity at that time. It was somehow tangentially linked to Boston, and they would do these art and food parties and music. And so, hey, Dave, would you go in and do the music? So I happily agreed. I did one in Long Beach at Miller Children's Hospital down there, and just really had overall my best day being a musician was that day. I mean, going in there and, the parents are there with their kids. The kids, it was the pediatric oncology ward, and, just sweet babies and their parents that were just so excited to, have music and an uplifting kind of event. And that really it was right around the time of Boston Strong. So that was 2013. And it just all kept coalescing in my mind. Like, I want to keep doing something like this. And that charity morphed into some other kind of idea. And I just always had it in mind. I really want to do this. And I was like, why don't I just start, my own and then hire musicians in this area? And I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area. Hire musicians in this area to go out to hospitals and healthcare facilities and cancer support groups and do music. So I started it last year, and just, going out and doing the visits myself, and, just building up the idea that this service exists, and putting it into every place I can possibly get into. And hospitals are hard enough to get into sometimes, and now with COVID, impossible. Right. So we do virtual visits now. So if people have anybody with health challenges or anybody in a bad situation, we will do a virtual visit for them. And I have several just super talented musicians and myself who do these virtual visits for kids, teens, and adults and seniors, and any age. There's no limitation imposed on that. It's just music is good for everybody. And I always tell people it's the closest thing we have to magic is music. It just has this incredible healing power, and just this power to access these memories that are so again, impactful and meaningful to people, that just pull them out of their misery.
So if somebody wanted to either make a request to have you perform for someone who's suffering, or a donation, how would they go ahead and do that?
Yeah, so if you go to harmonyandhealing.org, that is the website, and there's a way to request virtual visits, and there's a way to donate right in there. And we have grand plans for, bringing this out nationally. And in fact, when we do shows in other areas, we always ask about, well, what are the local hospitals? And if we're going to be in the area, that we can do harmony and healing visits in those areas to further, spread the word. So yeah, absolutely. People can donate, and they can request virtual visits on harmonyandhealing.org.
We are on Artists on Lockdown. David, what's next?
What's next? Well,
you've accomplished so much. What's next?
What's next is waiting out this thing. Like I said, we do have a show next Friday, which is our last show of the year for David Victor, the Hits of Boston Styx, and my amazing band. And Then next year, we've got Bohemian Queen finally rolling out. We've got some dates, one in Iowa, one in San Diego, one up here in Northern California in Livermore. And so performing arts centers, such as similar to, maybe not as nice as yours, but very similar to the beautiful Palace Theater. And the Zeppelin Band, I hope to get that going. And then my Beatles, Let It Be Acoustic. We already have dates, also performing arts centers. And also I have another band called Supergroup SF, and we're doing shows mostly up here in Northern California, but it's the greatest hits of the San Francisco Bay Area music scene. And Journey to Janis Joplin, and everything in between. Metallica, Train, Creedence. If you didn't know it was a tribute to SF music, you'd just think, this is a tribute to the greatest rock of all time.
David, do you have anything else you want to add?
Gosh, if anybody would like to know more about the bands, they can go to davidvictorpresents.com and book any bands there that we have on there. Of course, we are accepting dates and routings for 2021 and 2022 already. And the band that was formerly that band is called David Victor, the Hits of Boston Styx, and that was an unplugged show we did. And that band is bookable also. So davidvictorpresents.com and harmonyandhealing.org are the two salient points for this interview.
Thank you so much for taking time to be with us today. It's been a real pleasure for me sitting with an iconic rock star like yourself. Anybody that can tour with Boston is accomplished quite a bit.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate your overly kind words.
And I want to thank Steve Lobb and Ben for putting this all together today and for inviting me. This is actually my first hosting of a rock legend.
Oh,
most of my hosting is done for industry conferences, so this is a nice break.
Well, you did fine work, Mike, on your debut maiden voyage here.
Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. This has been Artists on Lockdown.
See you soon.